Now, it's my privilege to introduce Andrew Ng. He's co-founder and chairman of the board of Coursera. He's an adjunct professor in the computer science department at Stanford University. And as I think everybody knows, in 2011, he led the development of Stanford's massive open online course platform, a MOOC, and taught an online machine learning class that was offered to over 100,000 students. That was the initiative that led to the co-founding of Coursera. He was also the founding lead of the Google Brain team, which helped Google become a leading AI company, as well as the former chief scientist at Baidu, where he led the company's AI strategy and execution. He's authored or co-authored 200 research papers in machine learning, robotics, and related fields. In 2013, he was named to the Time 100 list of most influential people. He holds degrees from Carnegie Mellon University, sorry folks, MIT, and the University of California, Berkeley. And perhaps what's the most interesting to me personally about Andrew is that he teaches 11 Coursera courses, and he has taught over 3.4 million learners. That's a lot of people. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Betty. And thanks everyone for joining us and for sticking with us through the end of this conference. I was browsing through the attendees' names and regretful that we can't be hanging out in person together. But of all I've attended every Coursera Partners conference since the first one, and this is the largest one we've ever held. So that's a silver lining to that. Let me share my slides. So hopefully you can see this. Listening to all of the presentations from earlier today, I feel that because of the rise of COVID, there is now a fork in the road for higher education. Society is crying out to us for help. And we as a community have the capability to help a lot of people. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people. And the choices we make in this community, in the higher education community, the choices we make over the next year will stay with us for decades to come. The online education movement has been building for a decade, or maybe many decades. Some of you know about the starting of Coursera, where we had started with 2 courses out of Stanford, the machine learning class that I taught and the databases class taught by my friend Jennifer Witham. And in the not quite decade since then, the number of courses has grown from 2 to over 4,000 on Coursera, and an even larger number worldwide. So this has been growing for a long time. And all of you, our community, has been learning and figuring out how to teach online. And COVID is accelerating everything. We've seen how many workers are hit by COVID, especially the ones without a degree. We have seen how more people are taking online courses to help deal with self-isolation or to learn about public health. COVID is also creating unique challenges to our institutions. Washington Post, New York Times reported college students rebelling against full tuition after classes move online. And I was gratified when I heard Matthew in the panel just now talk about lower pricing, announcing lower pricing for their summer session. So many of the trends that have been underway are accelerated by COVID. And we all know that society is hurting. The IMF estimates that the world will experience the worst recession since the Great Depression. Many of us that lived through the global financial crisis of 2009, where the global economy shrunk by 0.1%. This time round, it will shrink much more by IMF estimates. And just in the US alone, 22 million unemployed in a matter of weeks. And people are hurting. We have a big role to play to help many of these people. And compounding trend on trend, trust in expertise and trust in institutions has also been going down, not just for the past few months, but for many years now. Edelman carries out a large annual, very large multi-city survey called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And in one of the recent studies, they plot different institutions according to how competent they are viewed and how ethical they are viewed. So the horizontal axis is how competent is an institution, vertical axis is how ethical is an institution. And businesses are viewed as quite competent, but not always the most ethical on average. NGOs, non-government organizations, are viewed as relatively ethical, but not as competent. And government media are perceived by citizens all around the world as neither necessarily competent nor ethical. I'm not saying that any of these perceptions are fair. I think there are plenty of highly competent and highly ethical individuals in all of these institutions, but there's just a perception of a large swath of society. And we have a lack of institutions that are broadly perceived, fairly or unfairly, but lack of institutions that are broadly perceived as both highly competent and highly ethical. I would quite like for our institutions of education, our institutions of higher education, to be able to play that role. This trust barometer did not have a note specifically on higher education, but we've all seen the trends as educators for many years now. And so maybe it's no surprise, therefore, that with the rise of COVID, with all of these impacts, higher education is in crisis. You've seen just in the last few recent period of time articles with titles like Crisis in Higher Education, or in my home state of California, California's higher education crisis, or Crisis of American higher education, and so on. On and on and on. We're seeing articles like these. Oh, and did I say that this was created by the COVID crisis? Actually, these articles were published well before the COVID crisis. So it's strange and interesting that the field of higher education has been in crisis for about a decade now. I think COVID is accelerating this crisis, but if we were already in this state, even before the recent pandemic, I think this is even more true now. You know, I'm proud to be an educator, excited about the discipline, very committed to education, but I would quite like to do something so that maybe by the year 2025, maybe we can all work really hard for a few years and not be in crisis anymore a few years from now. It doesn't seem like the healthiest state for our industry to be in, to have been in crisis for so long. But to me, I think this popular reflection of the state of crisis is maybe a sign that despite all the very positive contributions that we have and that we're striving to make, that there's a potential for us to do even better. One of the documents that moved me the most is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I had first read this document when I was a young assistant professor at Stanford, and it really moved me the first time I read this. But quoting from Article 26, it says, we as a society declared in 1948, that was the year my father was born, 72 years ago, we as a society decided that everyone has the right to education. Education should be free, at least in elementary and fundamental stages. Tech and professional education may be generally available, and higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. Sadly, despite this proud declaration, this beautiful declaration that we made as a society 72 years ago, this still isn't the reality we live in today. And education is limited by geography, by social economic limitations, by political restrictions. Visa restrictions have already been making it hard for students to get an education, and it's become even harder just in the past few weeks. Just last night, the United States president tweeted out about suspending immigration to the United States, and I have no idea how this will affect many of our students that have been or are counting on maybe coming to the United States for their studies. And even Simone, and outside the United States, Simone from Imperial on the panel mentioned just now, people finding it hard to get to London. This is true not just in the United States and in the UK, but all around the world. And COVID is accelerating travel restrictions like crazy. I think it's up to all of us to use the digital realm to make sure that education becomes more rather than less accessible. Now, amidst all of this doom and gloom, amidst all of these challenges we face, there is a massive silver lining. I think the silver lining is that there's growing acceptance of the virtual world of online education. And we're also really lucky that we work in an industry sector that in education, a lot of our work can move online. Not all of it, not easily, but a lot of our work can move online. So as an educator, I feel a special responsibility for us to lead this change and to play the role that all of us, that all of you can play to help the rest of society. And part of the silver lining is that even with everything going on around the world, I see that people want to feel empowered. Despite the unemployment, despite the uncertainty around the world, people wake up in the morning wanting to have productive quarantine mornings and afternoons and evenings. And Jeff showed this picture of a rapid rise in new user enrollments. And this is not a short-term trend that'll be over when COVID dies down. This growth in online education has been a long-term trend, but only accelerated by COVID. And you know what? With these millions of learners all around the world learning new habits, they're teaching themselves how to learn online. I feel like as an instructor, I've been teaching my Stanford classes online via Zoom, and just as I had to learn new skills, our students, our learners are having to learn new skills to succeed in learning online. And hopefully more countries will emerge from lockdown soon. But even when all reopen our campuses, when social distancing can be relaxed, the skills that these millions or tens of millions, hundreds of millions of online learners are learning right now, they won't forget these skills. And this creates an opportunity for us to keep on using the digital medium to keep on serving them even after COVID is over. I like this quote by one of the partners at IDEO, who said that the virus seems like an accelerator for digital change that was already underway, and that this digital mindset will persist. And it's highly unlikely that companies or universities or students will try to return to what worked prior to the pandemic. Patrick Brothers during the panel also said that what might happen, what we previously thought might happen over the next 10 years, will now maybe happen over the next 2 years. And amidst all this change, I feel like digital pedagogy is still in its infancy. You know, I've been teaching online for a long time, even prior to Coursera, putting videos on YouTube, running little experiments, many of which frankly went nowhere. But even today, I feel that online pedagogy, the way we teach online interactive learners, is still in its infancy. I've been teaching my on campus, I guess my Stanford class, using flipped classroom for many years now, with online digital content, auto grading, and recently, like everyone else, had to move the live portion of that class to Zoom. And I've really enjoyed, and on one hand, I miss the deeper, emotional connection with learners and seeing people in 3D and getting to shake their hands after class. But on the flip side, I've really enjoyed interacting with my students in real time via chat. Previously, when I asked a question in class, one person, would get to answer. Now I routinely ask questions in Zoom chat and ask every single student in the class to answer. And I really like that everyone in my classroom, digital classroom, now gets to participate. And even though the world's been participating in online education for a long time, 8 years, Coursera, maybe many decades as a society, there is still so much more we can do. You heard Ken talk about peer grading using machine learning. I'm really excited about the Coursera Labs for project guided project work features that Namit talked about, Shavin, and talked about many new product features. And when I look at where online education is now and how much better we can make the experience still in the future, I think there is still so much to do. And I'm very confident that 5 years from now, we'll look back at these incredibly rudimentary things we're doing back in 2020 and say, wow, those things we thought were so advanced in 2020, boy, that was so ancient and so archaic. And we can deliver such a better experience to our learner right now. And, we saw a number of newspaper articles about the shortage of jigsaw puzzles, right? That, because of social distancing, shelter in place, the world doesn't have enough jigsaw puzzles. And, making new jigsaw puzzles is really hard. It's really complicated. But the nice thing about what we can do teaching online is if we had digital jigsaw puzzles, the software apps for digital puzzles, that can be replicated at scale very quickly. So digital innovation is one of the things that as we innovate, as we come up with new forms of pedagogy, our community, all of you, the teachers represented here, we can quickly take those ideas and replicate that to learners all around the world because the digital medium is easy to scale up. So with all of the challenges we face and with all of the opportunities, I think we come back to this fork in the road. We do face significant, the world faces significant challenges. Ted talked about universities maybe at a higher risk of closure. And the challenges that society face and the challenges that all of us in higher education face is creating a fork in the road. Where on one hand, we could keep on doing businesses as usual. And maybe some of our institutions will be okay. We do have some very robust institutions of higher education. And maybe we could have instructors teach on Zoom, but keep a lot of things the same. And maybe some of the institutions will do okay. But I hope that all of us will step up and rethink how we can best be helpful to the world. Because with society in crisis, with society reaching out to us for help, with unemployed learners, with people needing hope, getting an education, because the learning cannot stop, even when people are at home, I think it is incumbent on all of us as leaders in education to step up and rethink how we can help the world. I think this may be a moment that if we as a community, no one of us alone can do this, but if we as a community can rethink how we can use digital tools to serve all of these people that are newly willing to accept digital learning, then the opportunity is greater than ever. And I hope we can build a world, bridge a world across time zones and build a world where your education doesn't need a passport. Like most worthwhile endeavors, this will be hard work, but every day I remain grateful to all of you, to Coursera's partners, students, on moving forward to build this world where anyone in the world can get access to a great education. And I'd like to close just by thanking all of you again. When we started Coursera, we had no idea that over the next several years, it will blossom to such a large movement. And I am under no illusions that this could not have been done, but for the hard work of all of you, of all of our university partners. And every year, education has been in crisis, but in this moment in time, the world needs all of us. The world needs all of you more than ever. And I hope that all of us will keep on working hard and figure out how to use these digital tools to serve learners worldwide when they need us more than ever. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.